You're not lonely because something is wrong with you. You're lonely because, for the first time in your life, you've started being honest with yourself. You no longer fake a smile, no longer chase empty conversations, no longer endure shallow connections, just to avoid feeling empty. You're withdrawing, but not to disappear. You're pulling back, so you won't keep losing yourself in the noise of things that no longer matter, and that makes you feel more hollow than ever. But here's what no one told you. Loneliness is not a punishment. It's a signal, like an alarm sounding off, when you've wandered too far from your true self, like a red light flashing in your soul, reminding you it's time to come back. Not back to others, but back to yourself. Have you ever felt like that? Some nights, you open your eyes at 2 a.m., not because of noise, but because the silence inside you is too loud. Some moments, you're in the middle of a crowd, laughing, talking, and yet you feel like a ghost no one truly sees. You type a message, then delete it. You want to meet someone, but don't know what to say. And you ask yourself, is something wrong with me? Why does connection seem so easy for others, but feel so strange to me? No, nothing is wrong. You're just sensing something others haven't woken up to yet. The loneliness you feel is not because you lack someone, it's because you're touching a truth that for years you've lived as the version others expected you to be. And now that you're peeling off the mask, your soul feels lost. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. The moment you stop looking for someone to fill the void and start learning how to sit with yourself, the moment loneliness stops being something to escape and becomes a guide. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to share what matters most with anyone, and what matters most is your truest self. The part of you you once buried, just to be accepted. The part you tried to change, just to avoid being left behind. But now, loneliness is helping you call that part back. Not through noise, but through silence. Don't rush to fill this emptiness, because this space is the first sign that you're waking up. And if you're brave enough to stay in it, you'll start to hear the first message from yourself. Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that the older I get, the less understood I feel? It's not because you've closed yourself off. It's because you've started to see clearly that many of your relationships were built on pretending. You used to smile when you weren't happy, used to agree just to keep the peace, used to listen, but were never really heard. And eventually, you got tired of maintaining the easygoing image, tired of always being the one to reach out first, tired of being met with silence every time you tried to be honest. This is where many people begin to deny their own feelings. They label loneliness as weakness. They blame themselves for being too sensitive. They rush to fill the emptiness with work, relationships, or temporary distractions. But you're different, because somewhere deep down, you know very well, this isn't about the lack of people around you. It's about the lack of truth. You're missing a conversation where you don't have to perform, missing a gaze that actually sees you, not through you, missing a space where you don't have to explain why you're tired and still be understood. But you didn't have that, and because you've lacked it for so long, you started to believe that your loneliness is your fault. No, loneliness is not a fault. Loneliness is a pause, a space where you're forced to face the truth you've been avoiding. The truth that you've traded your peace for acceptance, lowered your boundaries just to keep a relationship, forgiven the unforgivable just because you were afraid of being left. And now, loneliness is making you repay all those debts, not with immediate pain, but with a long, stretching silence. You're still alive, but you no longer feel like you're living. You still show up, but you no longer belong anywhere. At this stage, loneliness is no longer just an emotion. It becomes a threshold, a space where your soul is waiting for you to decide, either keep living by others' expectations just to not be alone, or choose to walk alone for a while, so you can finally live true to yourself. And that's a hard choice, because deep down, you know, when you start living authentically, you will lose many things. False charm, superficial approval, the illusion of peace held together by emotionally shallow connections, you will lose. But from that loss, something new begins. You begin to keep only the conversations that are real. You begin to recognize the presence of those who don't need noise to feel close, and you begin to reconnect with yourself without playing a role. But to get there, you must pass through this phase, the phase where you no longer fit into the old places, but haven't found new ones yet, where you no longer belong to your old circles, but no one new has fully arrived. You're in between, the space between loneliness and awakening, and what you need most right now is not someone to pull you out, but the courage to stay and ask, why is my soul choosing this way to speak up? Because no one falls into deep loneliness for no reason. It only happens when you're touching something real, something you once buried, once forgot, once dismissed, just to keep others comfortable. Maybe it's the dream you set aside. Maybe it's the inner voice you've silenced for years. Or maybe it's the call of your true self, asking you to stop and face it. So ask yourself honestly, what are you holding inside that keeps you from feeling at peace, even when you're surrounded by people? There are days when you walk into a room full of familiar faces and suddenly realize you don't truly feel close to anyone. They laugh. You laugh too. They ask how you're doing. You answer, but inside, there's a distance you can't put into words. That distance didn't come from anyone else. It came from you. From all the times you forced a smile when you didn't want to. From all the times you listened just to avoid being called selfish. From all the times you typed, "I'm fine," when you were falling apart. You know this, but you keep pretending, because you don't want to burden anyone, because you don't want to be a problem, because you're afraid that if you open up, all you'll get is awkward silence. You're tired, but you keep going. You're sad, but you keep it hidden. You're losing touch with your emotions, but still pretend to be okay, because this world has no place for those who are too real. Then one day, you begin to pull back. No drama, no announcement, no breakdown. You simply stop texting first. Stop trying to hold on to connections that no longer feel mutual. Stop explaining why you need time alone. And right then, you enter a new kind of silence. Not the kind forced upon you, but the kind you choose to hold on to yourself. And then, the fear sets in. Fear because no one checks in anymore. Fear because the quiet feels like you're slowly sinking, and no one notices. Fear because no one seems to need you, when you're no longer the cheerful, people-pleasing version of yourself. And that is a shock, because you thought, if you've given so much, then when you go quiet, someone will notice. But no, no one notices. No one calls. No one looks for you. When you stop being the one who's always available, that's the moment you realize so many relationships weren't built on love, but convenience. So many connections weren't rooted in care, but in the habit of being served. And you, all this time, have been living as the one who's always there, always understanding, always kind, even while feeling completely lost inside. Carl Jung called this the shadow of people-pleasing, a part of the mind forced to hide what's real just to be accepted. You've sacrificed so many truths inside you, just to keep superficial connections alive. And when you couldn't carry it any longer, you let go. Not because you were weak, but because you'd been strong for far too long. Then loneliness came, like a cold wave, like a night with no end, no texts, no calls, no one asking, "Are you okay?" At first, you waited. Then you were disappointed. Then you went silent. And eventually, you started learning how to sit with yourself. You made a cup of tea and watched the rain fall. You went for walks alone. No headphones, no music, just the sound of your heartbeat. You cried, but didn't need anyone to see. And you wrote, not to post online, but to let it out. You started remembering what once made you feel alive. You looked back on relationships that made you forget who you were. You realized, many times, the pain didn't come from being left behind, but from lying to yourself that they ever truly cared. Loneliness, at this stage, is no longer an emotion. It becomes a mirror that doesn't lie. You see how far you've drifted from yourself. You see what's worth keeping, and what you must release, and you begin to quietly return to your real self. No longer forcing yourself to show up everywhere, no longer fearing the loss of people who were never sincere, no longer trading peace for the illusion of being needed. You no longer need others to understand you, because finally, you're beginning to understand yourself. That is the first step, and it's also the hardest one. Her name is Claire, 32 years old, living in a crowded city, working in marketing, plenty of friends, a boyfriend, and a group of close girlfriends. On the surface, Claire looked fine, but emotionally, she was slowly withering away, unnoticed. Every morning, Claire woke up on time, went to work, smiled at people, met deadlines, went home, cooked dinner, scrolled online a bit, then went to sleep. Everything seemed fine. But Claire wasn't. She started to realize she no longer cared about the things that used to bring her joy, not because of stress, not because she was bored, but because she no longer felt connected. Claire used to think she was just temporarily unmotivated, until one night she was at her own birthday party with cake, candles, her boyfriend, her friends, and suddenly broke down crying in the restroom. Not out of emotion, but out of emptiness. That was the first time Claire admitted to herself she felt completely alone. Even while surrounded by people who knew her name, celebrated her, and called her wonderful, Claire began to pull back. She replied to messages less, declined more invitations. She didn't try to explain, because she knew they wouldn't understand, and she was right. One friend messaged, "What's up with you? You've been kinda distant." Another shrugged. "Well, maybe we're just not vibing anymore." Her boyfriend stayed quiet, as if her withdrawal was a burden. Claire didn't blame them. She understood. She used to be that kind of person too, not knowing how to truly show up for someone else's pain. But now that she was the one in the dark, she finally understood the cost of not being able to speak her truth. Claire started writing every night for no one to see. She wrote down scattered thoughts, broken memories, things she'd long buried because no one wanted to hear them. In one journal entry, she wrote, "I used to be the cheerful, easygoing one, but I lost myself in shallow conversations. I used to be the always helpful one, but I'm exhausted because no one ever asked, 'What about you?' Oh, now I'm alone, and for the first time, I feel closer to myself than ever before." Claire didn't radically change her life. She still went to work, still said hello, still lived kindly, but she stopped forcing herself. She chose silence when she had nothing real to say. She declined polite invites. She quietly let go of relationships that were held together by duty, not listening. And then something strange happened. For the first time in months, Claire walked into a cafe alone. No phone, no laptop, just to sit, breathe, and feel her own presence. A stranger at the next table looked at her, smiled gently, nodded. No conversation, no flirting, no expectations. Claire smiled back, not out of politeness, but because, for the first time, she felt truly alive. No performance, no hiding. Claire's story doesn't have a cinematic twist. There's no perfect man who shows up, no magical healing moment. But something important did happen. Claire no longer felt lonely, because she no longer needed others to fill her up. She started living, not to please anyone, but to be honest with her own emotions, and from that place, new connections began to appear. Fewer, but real, slower, but stronger, not because Claire went looking, but because when you live on your true frequency, you naturally attract souls on the same wavelength. Loneliness didn't disappear overnight, but it stopped being scary. It became a companion, reminding Claire, every time you touch the truth, you'll have to walk through some darkness. But if you're brave enough, you'll come out on the other side, more whole than ever before. Loneliness is not the problem. The problem is how you were taught to look at it. You were taught that loneliness is a sign of something's wrong, that if you're alone for too long, it means there's a problem with you, that a normal person must always be surrounded, constantly social, constantly belonging. But no one told you this. A truly awakened soul cannot live in noise for too long. When you begin living honestly with yourself, two things become clear. First, very few people are truly honest with you. Second, most of the connections you had only existed when you were still willing to perform. We are not lonely because no one is around. We are lonely because we're surrounded by people who are not real, and we are tired of pretending to be fine, pretending to be cheerful, pretending to be close. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to share what matters most with anyone. And what matters most is your true self. The emotions you've never spoken out loud, the exhaustion that's always brushed aside with lines like, 'Just be strong.' You are not too sensitive. You're just living truthfully in an environment that's too fake. You're not too quiet. You're just no longer interested in empty conversations. The price of awakening is walking a part of the path alone. But it's that very path that teaches you to distinguish what's real from what's convenient, what's love from what drains you. The issue isn't the feeling of loneliness. The issue is the expectation you've carried. I need someone to feel whole. No, you're not lacking. You're not abandoned. You're not pitiful. You're simply leaving a place you no longer belong to and haven't yet arrived at the new one. You're in between. And it's exactly in this transition space that your soul grows the most. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to run from emotions. It teaches you to look at everything and call it by its name. No sugarcoating, no dramatizing, no self-deception. Stoicism teaches you this. You can't control who leaves, but you can fully control how you respond and how you show up. Loneliness only hurts when you resist it, when you believe it's wrong, when you try to cover it with other people. But when you accept it as a companion, you'll see it didn't come to destroy you, but to remind you that all these years you've lived too far from your own self, and it's time to come home. No one can walk this stretch with you, not because they're bad, but because this is a personal path. This is where you learn to sit in silence, without feeling empty, where you begin to speak with yourself, without feeling lost. And right here, you will rebuild the deepest connection, the connection between you and the most honest part of your soul. From that space, new connections will begin. Not many, not fast, but real. Let's close this part with a Stoic rhythm. No, you're not fading into invisibility. You're just no longer a fit for places that stay shallow. No, you're not losing anyone. You're just withdrawing your energy from those who were never truly present. No, loneliness is not the enemy. It's the one walking you home. You are not being abandoned. You are being set apart. So you can truly see yourself. You are not becoming disconnected. You are gradually leaving relationships that were hollow all along. You are not lacking love. You are simply no longer mistaking love for the need to be noticed. You don't need someone to come save you. You just need a long enough silence to finally hear yourself speak. Loneliness doesn't kill you. Loneliness only kills the version of you that once performed to feel seen. The good one, the pleasant one, the always available one, the one who lived for others for so long they forgot what it means to live as themselves. Loneliness is a calling. The more unanswered it is, the more it turns you inward. No, this is not a punishment. This is a gift only the courageous can recognize. You are learning how to live without noise, without validation, without chasing someone just to feel worthy. You are learning to live slowly, to live truthfully, to live without being pulled around by false hunger. Remember, no one stays lonely forever, but no one truly moves through loneliness if they keep trying to fill it with people. Loneliness is not the enemy. It's a door that only opens when you're quiet enough and brave enough to stop knocking on someone else's. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Loneliness is the darkness, not to make you lost, but to help you clearly see what the real light is. Because true light never comes from someone else. It arrives when you stop trading parts of yourself just to be accepted. You may not be understood. You may no longer be close to those who once knew you. You may be alone for a long while, but this is not a price. It's a refinement. And after that filter, only what's truly worthy will remain. Repeat this, like a mantra of awakening. I am not abandoned. I am returning to myself. I'm not wrong for feeling lonely. I'm simply sensing something others aren't yet awake enough to feel. I no longer need to be understood. I just need to pause and listen to myself more deeply. Silence is not surrender. Loneliness is not failure. Withdrawal is not weakness. Only those who've lived in falsehood will understand the peace of a single, honest moment. And only those who've given too much to the unworthy will truly grasp the value of sitting with themselves without feeling empty. You've come a long way. Don't go back just because you miss what once hurt you. Don't go back just because you fear walking forward alone. Keep walking, because on the other side of loneliness is where you no longer need to be loved, to start living fully. If you're still here, still listening, maybe you're in a phase like this too. A quiet transition with no name, no clear companions, and no one who truly understands. You've been slowly pulling away, not because you hate the world, but because you've lost yourself too many times trying to blend into it. You don't feel like explaining anymore, because you've spoken so much, and no one truly heard you. You no longer feel the urge to prove you're kind, because you've lived kindly, and it was taken for granted, as if it was just your duty. You no longer desperately need someone to pull you out of the emptiness, because you've been pulled before, only to be left again. Maybe you've been silent for long enough, but this time, don't use silence to endure. Use it to stand firm. Stop bracing. Stop pretending to be fine. Stop acting like you don't need anyone, just to protect yourself from getting hurt. You're human. You feel. You're allowed to long for a place where you truly belong. But don't go looking for it outside. If your inside is still collapsing, Loneliness doesn't come to break you. It comes to stop you from betraying yourself. This is not an ending. This is the beginning. The beginning of learning to talk to yourself without feeling sad. The beginning of living alone without feeling incomplete. The beginning of carefully choosing what gets access to your inner world. And then the right people will come. Slow, but certain. Few, but deep. Quiet, but they'll stay. Because once you stop losing yourself just to be loved, you'll only attract souls who know how to love. By listening, you don't need anyone to understand you anymore. You just need to stop waiting for that from people who never truly saw you. You don't need many people around. You just need a space safe enough where you don't have to perform every time you open up. You don't need to live loudly to prove anything. You just need a silence deep enough to calm the chaos within. If at this moment you still feel a lump in your chest, don't try to forget it. Pause it, just for a while, to truly see it and choose yourself again. And if you need a place to start over, start with the emotion that's present in you right now. It doesn't need to look good. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to be honest, because every healing journey begins with a moment of sitting still and no longer pretending you're okay. If you've ever lost yourself just to hold on to a relationship, if you've ever sacrificed too much of yourself to fix others, then the next video is for you. Stop fixing people. Start understanding yourself.